are listening to the Lingerie Success Podcast, the first podcast of its kind committed to practical and actionable marketing strategies, business advice, interviews, and tools to help your lingerie store thrive. Are you ready? So let's get started.
Hello, Lingerie Success listeners, and welcome to episode 5 of our podcast. We are so excited to have you guys here today. This podcast is all about understanding sales and tracking. So we're going to be going over some essential marketing metrics that you should be tracking for your business. And it's also all about knowing your numbers. So in order for you to know what to track, you need to know exactly what your numbers are and where they stand. And so we wanted to talk about that today. We know that that's something that all small business owners should be aware of and should be actively tracking and all that good stuff. And so I know that Kris and Angel are here with me today, and I know that they're excited too. And Kris, how are you doing today?
Good. Very busy. Very busy this morning. We had a lot of stuff going on. This has been a very interesting and long week. I mean, we've been working since last week. We worked through the weekend because we had our photo shoot, our SS18, which I'm very excited about. And Angel and I, we carpool. He's practically my neighbor, so it was, we had a really good long week, but really productive one.
Yeah, I can't wait to see the images from that. It's going to be amazing. And then also, Angel, I know you had a business idea that you were thinking through. You guys were going through. You want to tell us about that?
Me and Kris sort of became the next Mark Zuckerbergs in the car.
Oh my gosh.
And our global e-commerce platform was being used by top 500 companies. And but then, of course, reality settled in when we both got home and Googled and found that idea had already been taken. And so that tends to happen a lot, unfortunately. You think you come up with a great idea, and it's, once in a lifetime idea, but then you go home and then you Google it, and there's already like 3 other companies doing the same exact thing. So that's what happened.
Yeah, but I mean, like I was telling Angel in the car, a lot of times we have these ideas and we find out that they've been used before, or we find that somebody takes them. But I think, for me, I think that's inspiring, because it means that if you honestly know that you came up with an idea and then you found that somebody else did it, I'll tell Angel, that's quite inspiring, because it means that you are at a certain level of thinking that allows you, I guess your mind is opened up to the possibilities of some pretty extraordinary things. I think in life, we get away from having those quiet moments and really, meditating, pondering or visualizing what we can achieve, what we can do. So I think, every time I love me and Angel, every photo shoot, twice a year, we carpool a few times, and we usually come up with stuff, talk about stuff, and there's a lot of eye-opening things that we can apply when we get back, So I think, like I said, this week has been a very interesting and very productive week for us.
Yes,
That's
definitely,
awesome.
Definitely.
That's awesome. And I know sometimes even when you have those ideas, sometimes they lead to other ideas that haven't been done before.
Absolutely.
So maybe you guys, for the next photo shoot, you'll have a brainstorming session and you'll come up with an idea that hasn't been done before.
I think we need a website where you can buy books, like any kind of book, and then gets delivered to your house.
That's a great idea. And maybe I'll name it Amazon.com.
I mean, you could.
Yeah, that's true.
Oh, well, that would be good. And I just want to say, for all of you guys out there who are, busy and you're picking up your kids, you're driving to work, you're doing all that stuff. When you're in the car, sometimes that's the best time to think of ideas. And it's definitely one of the times when you're usually the most relaxed. So I always suggest, just relaxing when you're driving or walking, taking, wherever you're going, taking a train, and just relaxing and kind of letting your mind wander a little bit. And then just seeing what happens, because sometimes when you're not focusing on thinking of ideas, that's when the good ideas come to you. So I always love that.
Absolutely.
Well, for today, for our podcast, we have a pretty big agenda for you guys today. We wanted to go over marketing metrics, as I mentioned, and how you can track them for your business. So this is a big deal for everyone out there, for small businesses. Even big businesses, they have to track their metrics. They have to know where they stand with their competitors too. So Kris, I wanted to dive right in and discuss some of the essential marketing metrics that every small business owner should track.
Absolutely.
What are some that you would suggest?
Got it. Well, I think, first I want to introduce a quote to you. If you guys are aware of Peter Drucker, he's credited for two of the most important quotes in business management today. The first one is, if you can't measure it, you can't improve it, right? The second thing that he says is, management is doing things right, but leadership is doing the right things. This guy, a lot of the listeners of our podcast probably have heard of him. He's produced about 39 books on the subject of business management. Drucker Institute is named after him. So he's a very, very well-known person, a business thought leader, basically. And one of the things that's relevant about his quotes to our podcast is tracking and doing the right things with those tracking metrics is really important. One of the things that we should normally, when I speak to our retailers, I have conversations about marketing. I get asked the questions of, what else can I do to drive more business to my door? What can I do to maximize the effectiveness of my marketing and stuff like that. But when I often ask them about their numbers, I ask them, well, how many customers walk through your door on a day-to-day basis? A vast majority of them will say, let me get back to you on that. They don't really know their numbers. And that's not all the customers and all of our clients, of course, but a lot of the ones that I've spoken to have that. You ask them, what is the average customer value? I don't know, actually. Sometimes it's this number, sometimes it's that number. But I think knowing those numbers are important. So the first one that I think you really need to know is, you need to know the numbers that you're getting with your promotion. Whenever you do a promotion, how many people take you up on that offer? If you do a Facebook campaign, you post a giveaway, or you're doing any event, you really need to know the number of people that you're attracting with that, with that effort. The second thing that you really need to look into is, from all of those customers or prospects that you've acquired from your marketing efforts, you need to know how many of them convert into an actual customer. So the first one is knowing your client acquisition cost. The second one is your customer conversion ratio, right? You really need to know that. And the last thing is, you need to know the average dollar amount that they spend, so that if you're spending $5 to acquire a customer and then they're spending $20, that that for every spend that you make for $20, you can acquire 4 more customers at $5 a piece. So knowing those numbers and working with those numbers together really will hone in and allow you to strategize and build out a funnel or a marketing strategy more effectively.
Absolutely. And just to add to that, the metrics that Kris just mentioned, this is why we talked about buyer personas in podcast number 3. We talked about USPs, or unique selling propositions, last week. So there's definitely an order to our podcast. And so for us, you have to know who you're targeting first before you can really track the efforts of your target audience. And so that's why it's so important when Kris says that you want to know exactly how successful your promotions are, and if they're working. Because if they're not working, but it's something that you think is, but they're not on paper, then maybe it's worth trying something different next time. Maybe it's not worth doing the same thing.
Definitely.
And then also, when Kris talks about the conversion rate, that's something else that's super important. I know that I work on our blogs, Lingerie Success, and then our Parfait blog. And conversion rate is something that I look at too as one of the metrics as well. But it's not just limited to online. It's also something you can consider in store. So the customers that are in store, how many consumers are you converting to customers? How many consumers that walk into your doors are buying your product? So there's a lot of different things that you can consider when you're looking at the different metrics. And it's not just limited to one platform. It's not just social media. It's not just in-store, online. It's a collection of everything and everywhere your products are.
Yeah, absolutely.
I know that Kris also, so we've talked a little bit about social media. We'll talk a little bit more about it, though, in the next coming podcasts. For us, Facebook ads, I know it's something that a lot of people are talking about. For us, Facebook ads are super important. And they're also part of our marketing plan. So
Yeah, absolutely. It is. I mean, I think Facebook, majority of our listeners and a lot of small businesses would have found that in the beginning when Facebook first started and we first started to use social media or Facebook as a channel to attract customers or deliver our message, we found that the key was to get the number of likes or followers up, right? But what we found today, that's changed a lot. I mean, I'm not sure if we tackled it on this podcast before, but I talk about it every time, is Facebook has become a pay-to-play platform. Majority of the time you post something, like for us, we have maybe 75,000 followers or likes or something on our Facebook page. And whenever we post something, only a few thousand of them see that at any point in time. To really reach out and showcase the content that we produce, that we work so hard for, we have to boost the ads. It's a necessary expense that unfortunately we have to do to be able to get the mass outreach of the stuff, like I said, that we work hard to produce. And a lot of our business owners that are listening to this podcast are probably experiencing the same thing. When they first got into Facebook, maybe a few years back, whenever they posted something, they just got engagement. People just like their stuff. They read their stuff because, hey, majority of it gets flooded. It floods your feed. But that was the most important thing about Facebook, was because it flooded people's feed, people started hiding posts, marking them as spam and all this stuff, because we're not ready, or we're not used to providing value first. I think we talked about that in the last podcast that we had. That's quite important. But this Facebook platform, what it allows us to do is it provides us a ton, like I'm telling you, a ton of metrics. You can practically know what time your content is being consumed. You can see what age group, what demographic, where they're located, how much time they spent viewing a video that you posted. It's just so much information for you to massage and use for your business strategy. And that's what we use Facebook a lot for. It's sort of our testing ground for seeing if an image work, if content message work, because we know that a person or a type of demographic is more actively engaging in a specific type of content. So we know that if we're making a specific content for a specific target demographic, we're able to look at what we did successfully before to be able to do that. I think, we're curious about spend. A lot of times we're asked, well, how much should I spend on advertising in general? That's a great question. But the answer to that is really, it depends. Different businesses require different levels of marketing. If in business school, marketing, when you study marketing, you're taught that you should spend anywhere between 7 to 8% of your business gross profit. If you're I guess $5 million and less business, on some areas in some industries, they go upwards of 20%. I think we were talking about this before the podcast. Amazon, when they started their business, they were losing money year on year. They were already a public company. They're big time. Like, you're talking about billions of dollars in gross sales, but their net profit was almost nil, because they knew the number of customers that they needed to be able to turn a profit and grow that at a critical mass. When they figured out that number, Jeff Bezos, I think that's his number one. That's what he brings to the table. He really knew that. And he said that keep acquiring customer. If I think their cost was, if I'm not mistaken, between $79 or $150. And they knew that every time they spent $79 to $150, the lifetime value of this customer is like $1,000. So what they said was, let's spend as many $79 to $150 as we can to acquire as many customers as we can. And I think we touched on this in the US. I don't know anybody, maybe if you're not technologically connected, which I don't know anybody that isn't, everybody would have been touched by something that Amazon did. Whether you have Echo in your home, you get Amazon Prime at work, anybody, you've seen Amazon as the brand. You've seen that smiling arrow, so that's an important thing. So really, really knowing your metrics, your numbers, and how much you spend is important, but the number of amount you actually will spend depends on how you're acquiring customers and what the value is of each of those customers.
Yeah, and that's excellent insight, truly, for advertising. That it does really just depend, and with advertising as well, with anything in marketing, it takes time to really see results. So just know that if you do decide to increase your spend for per customer, once you calculate out the lifetime value, if you decide to run a new Facebook ad campaign, results typically don't come overnight. So it's going to take time for you to see if your marketing efforts are really paying off. That's why it's so important to stick with it. And when you are calculating your ad spend, to be realistic, to determine, if you can, per day exactly how much you're willing to spend towards Facebook ads, and if it would really be worth it for you in the long run. And if your customers are on Facebook, because sometimes your customers could be on Facebook, they could be more active on Instagram or Twitter. It really just depends on where your audience is and where they live. And that's where you want to focus your advertising efforts.
Absolutely. I mean, that goes back to your point. I mean, the point last week is you really, really, really need to know who your customer is. I think that's an important factor before you even get into any of these tracking stuff.
Yeah, that's definitely the foundation. And like we said in podcast number 3 with buyer personas, once you start writing out your buyer personas and identifying and defining who they are, it'll help you so much with deciding and who you should target for your business and for your marketing, and who your audience is. And sometimes when you start writing out your buyer personas and you start identifying your customers, they're different than you expected. And then also you might decide to carry a new product line that might be a little bit different than your bread and butter products, your best sellers, your items that sell consistently month after month. And that's where buyer personas come in handy too, because in order for you to target a new audience, you have to know exactly who you should be targeting and identifying that. So that's important too. I wanted to talk a little bit though about tools. So Kris, what are some tools that I can use to track the leads from promotions and marketing materials?
Absolutely. Well, I think I touched on it a little bit earlier. Facebook Insights provides you exactly that, insights into your customers, what they're doing with your content, what they're spending on, their time on, I mean. But the other free thing that you can do if you have a website, which I strongly suggest majority of our customers please, to get, is Google Analytics. It's a free tool. Google Analytics will tell you when your consumers are coming into your website, where they're from, if they're using mobile devices or they're using computers to engage with you. They've in the last few years, they've really developed their goals feature on their analytics, where you can pretty much track pages. So for example, you add a goal into a form, like making an appointment, a bra fitting appointment, for example. There's a thank you page that comes after that. You don't just leave a page and says, please submit your information to us. And then when they click submit, that's it. Ideally, that should be redirected to a thank you page to let them a little bit, give them a little bit more information to prepare them for the appointment. But that lead conversion there is trackable using Google Analytics. So if those of our listeners that still don't have a website, like I mentioned, I think in the first or second episode that we've had here, you can get it for free or really, really, really low cost. So I suggest people get their website together. You don't have to be selling e-commerce to have a website, but it should be a platform for you to educate your customers and really take advantage of using Google Analytics. I mean, we use Google Analytics a lot here in the office. Of course, there's a lot more metrics that we look at, but I mean, often when you walk into my room, I mean, you guys know it, you'll see me having like a screen with just like graphs and stuff like that. I'm not working the stock market, but really knowing our numbers is important to me, because I know if we're spending X amount on something, then it works, then I will tell you guys, please, let's do more of that. Or if there's something that's just not quite working, we know what to tweak. We know what to do. So using Google Analytics provides you a lot of insight. I mean, I think when you've installed Google Analytics and you let it run for at least a month, you'll be amazed by the amount of insight you'll be able to get. But the other thing, for those of the customers that don't have a website, what can you track? A lot of our businesses, they have cameras. It could be as simple as fast forwarding your camera and looking at how many people come through your door every day and then going to your cash register, or for those of you that don't have cash registers, so POS system, counting your ledger, looking at how much transactions I've had for that day. These are some of the things that you can use to track your leads, your promotion, and marketing materials, right? You can count, okay, if you saw, okay, today I counted 50 people that walk into the door. Out of that 50 people, how many orders did I get today? Oh, I got, I sold 10 customers. So that tells you for every 50 customers that walk into your door, you sold 10. And you average that out. You do that for a week or a month if you can. What that tells you, imagine how much information that will tell you. And then you average every week or every day how much sales, the actual number. Like if you sold $150 per person, average that out. Maybe on a Monday you earn $150 per customer. But on a Sunday, you can earn $500 from a customer because they have more leisure time to spend with you, and the activities that you're able to engage with them is a lot more. So it's very important for you to even use some of these tactics. It could be your POS, like I said, cameras, Google Analytics, Facebook Insights, and as simple as some of us write ledgers of our transactions. Look at that. Track it any way you can. The numbers are important because it allows you to really hone in and figure out what's broken, what's work. If something is working, do more of it, right? I think that's just common business practice. If something works, do more of it. If something doesn't work, either tweak it or stop doing it. But you won't know those things. You can't make that right decision if you don't have or don't look at your numbers.
Yeah, absolutely. And Kris, those are some really good points, especially with even just looking at your camera, looking to see exactly your foot traffic and who is walking through. And sometimes that's just a really, really good idea. It gives you insight that you wouldn't be able to put on paper. So that's important too. We did want to talk a little bit about conversion rates. So I know that we spoke about them, but we didn't really define them. So Kris, what exactly is a conversion rate?
Well, a conversion rate is simply the average number of people that take us up on our offer. It's sometimes called the closing rate. The amount of people that we attract and the amount of people from that attraction that converts into an actual dollar or a sale or a customer. That's what it is. I think sometimes we think of conversion rates in the terms of how much business do I generate over a long period of time. But a sales conversion is really honed into every single transaction. Like you mentioned, keeping tabs on your transactions, if you can, on an hourly level. If you have a POS system, which I think most businesses should have, Square is cheap to set up. I think you can take credit card and stuff like that. You can set up a POS very, very affordably these days. But the sales conversions that you have, you need to definitely know them because they're the foundation of everything else that you build around any of your other metrics. If you don't have a good sales conversion tracking, then you don't know how to increase the spend of your customer. You won't know how to get them to buy from you more often. And you don't know how much you're spending to acquire a customer. The sales conversion sort of is that bridge that puts all of that together.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's so important to mention, especially when you said that you have to have something to track your sales. And if you don't have that, then like you said, you can't see what you're doing. You don't really have any idea of your metrics if you're not tracking them. And that's really the basis of our podcast today. It's making sure that you guys have the right tools in place so then you can track the metrics and see exactly what you need to going forward. And so that's definitely a good way to figure out how to track and increase customer spend. I know that Kris had some good ideas for increasing customer spend and tracking it as well. And Kris, what would you suggest?
Well, I think the number one suggestion that I have is to really lock in on the value that you provide. If you're not providing customers the value that they deserve or that they're looking for, you're a commodity, right? I think we talked about this in another podcast. If they deem you as a commodity, then you're just like everybody else. It's just a matter of which is cheaper, which is more convenient to me, which is closer to me. But if you're able to lock in on the value that you provide to them, you can easily increase the spend more because they know, like, and trust you. So I think that's the number one thing that majority of our listeners really need to know. And, I really think that the outreach campaigns that we do, we really have to make it effective. Through our email, our social media, our SMS campaigns, our blog posts that we create. Those are some of the ways where you can increase the value. And with that, because they know, like, and trust you, you can sort of develop your sales funnel, right? So you know that at any given point, you know how many customers are coming into your sales funnel. You do have to create a sales funnel. And then as they build their relationship with you, they get deeper and deeper into your sales funnel. Increasing the amount of customer spend requires them to really trust you, that they're not just trying you out for the first time, or they're not just trying you out because you're the cheapest one, like I mentioned. They need to know, like, and trust you, and they need to have a vested interest in your success because they want to keep you. They know that there's no other place to buy a good set of bras. They don't have another place where they can get the great advice that they get from you or from your salesperson that are working in your store. So if you're continually providing value in that sense, that is one of the best ways for you to get increases on your customer spend.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree. I think that is super duper important. And then also just making sure, like we've said, that you have those tools in place to track it. So to make sure that what you're doing when you say that you want to, increase customer spend, that you have a point where you're starting and you're seeing exactly what your sales and your business is doing. And then you can look at it a couple months down the line and you can see if it's actually paying off, if your marketing efforts are working, and if your average spend is actually being increased. So we talked a lot a bit about, tools, but definitely the tools that you can sign up for, Facebook Insights, Google Analytics, making sure that your POS is set up, doing things by hand on paper every hour, every day. Definitely track your metrics and your customer spend so that you can see if your efforts are really working.
Yeah, I did wanted to mention, since we were talking about conversions and we were trying to figure out how to increase the spend, I think one thing that I did want to touch on is also, what should we know about the conversions? What are things that we should look out for with our conversion rates? I think once we have a website, a blog, social media, we need to know that something is working. I think I touched on this earlier. It takes us back to knowing our customers, but really being able to look at the metrics of what's working. If we know that we post a specific bra style, like if it's a online bra, we find when we look at our numbers, every time we post a picture about an online bra, we get more traffic to our website. We get more traffic that we may get more engagement on our social media. What does that tell us? It tells us, hey, let's post more of that. But looking at the numbers, if you don't look at the numbers, you're not able to make these corrections, make the fixes necessary. The other thing is sales conversion does not always depend on us as a business owner, right? A lot of times, a lot of the stores have employees. Knowing how the sales process actually works, how the actual sales happen when that conversion happens. Conversion rate, like I mentioned earlier, we think of it as just sales. But conversion is anything that happens, whether they're converting from an advertisement that we do, they convert to a sale, or they convert to an upsell. That's all conversions. We have to keep track of that. But for example, one of our sales reps or employees in the store, they make a sale. What caused that sale? Is it a certain number of factors like the education part, their experience in the bra fitting process, or maybe it was the suggested products that were given to them? Maybe the different scenarios that you're presented with, if you are able to track those, your sales conversions will dramatically increase, because then again, you can apply what works. You can do more of what works and prevent or minimize the stuff that don't work. Maybe it's the products that you have in your store. What if you don't have the assortment that matches the customers that you have? If you're not tracking any of these things in your sales conversion process or your sales funnel, then how would you know if the product assortment that you have works? A lot of times, we experience this. We have customers that they buy stuff from us, they get stuck with, right? It's the sad reality. But that tells us that this particular customer or client of ours does not know their customers well enough, or they're not tracking their conversion rate. Because if you know what sells, if you know Charlotte sells for you the best, or the Carol sells for you the best, or the basics like the Jeannie and Casey sells for you the best, then why would you carry sizes or products on the fringe? You should focus on the stuff that actually makes sense for your customers to really hone in on and improve your overall profits, right? Those are some of the things that I did want to touch on as well.
We did have some homework for you guys. So we wanted you to sign up for a Google Analytics account if you do have a website. It's free. It's free to sign up. Doesn't take very long. And then also link your Google Analytics account to your website. So those are definitely two things that we'd love for you guys to do. If you're on Facebook, another piece of homework, create a plan for Facebook ads and then calculate how much you're willing to pay per day for those ads. And really, if you have the time, or if you can make the time, take a look back at some of your past social media posts on Facebook and look at the ones that had the most engagement. So if you're looking for likes, for comments, all that stuff, see which ones had the most engagement and which ones your audience gravitated toward. And then maybe consider that when you're creating your plan for your next Facebook ads. And we had a question of the day for you guys as well. So we wanted to hear what your favorite ways to connect with your customers are. So do you like connecting with your customers on social media? Do you prefer connecting with them in store? Do you love just picking up the phone and having conversations and telling them about new products? So what are your favorite ways to connect with your customers?
Absolutely. Well, I want to leave the listeners with this. Often in our business, we leave data out of our strategies, right? We tend to focus on the shiny new opportunity. There's Instagram that's a hit, Snapchat and all this stuff. We get lost in these new opportunities, but we don't have enough sales. Then we stress about it. At the end of the month, we don't know what's working, what's not working. If we're not looking at our data carefully, then we're always stressed out at the end of the month. I think that once our listeners get used to the fact that data can be used for their business very, very strategically, they'll find that more often than not, they're using these data to make sound business decisions. The other thing is, we can't really run our business blindly, right? We certainly don't do that in day-to-day life. We have to know where we're going before we go there. I remember my grandfather always told me that you can never get where you want to go if you don't know where you've been. And creating a roadmap for your success is important. And the data that you collect is part of your roadmap. It tells you where's traffic. You mentioned Waze earlier. It tells you where traffic is. It tells you if there's a detour. It tells you if the business is closed. All of these information are collected through data. So it's very, very important for our listeners to really understand and believe that data is important. I know all our listeners are busy with their business. That's understandable. But it doesn't take a lot of time, maybe once a month, for you to really look at those cameras, look at those data, and really dive in and dig deeper to really hone in on your marketing strategies and your sales strategies. So I just wanted to leave the listeners with that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Those are really good points, Kris. I just wanted to mention too, we wanted to, thank you guys for listening. And if you like what you're hearing, if you're, getting some value from our podcast, please do, leave a review. We're on iTunes. We love 5-star reviews. If you're finding a lot of value in our content, we're on iTunes, we're on Google Play. We're also on SoundCloud, which you can't leave reviews on, but you can download the podcast from there as well. And then every week we publish show notes. So we publish notes on our podcast that you can consume, and they take a lot of the information that we talk about in the podcast, and they break it down, and they're very short, but they're very concise. And so I always recommend, if you're listening to the podcast, make sure you take some time to consume the show notes too, because sometimes even as podcasters, we will have a moment where we'll finish the podcast and then we'll be listening to it later, or we'll be thinking about it later, and something else will come up. We'll think of something new. So even in our show notes, we add things that we maybe might not have discussed in depth in our podcast, but are relevant and important too. So it's definitely worth it to listen to read the show notes if you can, and then also to visit us on iTunes, leave a review, post your feedback. We would absolutely love to hear it. And then while you're there online, check us out. Come join our Facebook group, Lingerie Success, and then also come join our LinkedIn page.
Absolutely. Don't forget to visit lingeriesuccess.com. That's where you find us. You can go to Parfait Lingerie and click on Lingerie Success and all that, but it's easier for you to just go to lingeriesuccess.com. You'll have access to all the previous episodes, and we post articles on a regular basis to really, really help our retailers here. So I encourage everybody to go visit that.
Chris, don't forget to mention our YouTube channel where they can actually see us now.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Yeah, we
Angel's
just
been
added
working
that on the last
we
two
have
episodes.
a little camera.
Yeah, so you
that
can
you'll get
actually
to
see
us.
us actually doing the podcast. 'Cause I
that's
know
awesome.
you want to see our amazing faces.
Angel.
I don't know about amazing, but well, absolutely. Thank you for reminding the listeners about that, Angel.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, thank you guys so much for being a part of our podcast this week. And I also wanted to thank Kris and Angel for being here too. And we are so excited to see you guys next week.
Absolutely. Perfect. Thank you so much, everybody. Have a great week.
Thank you, guys.
This podcast is brought to you by Parfait. For more information, show notes, and downloads, please go to www.lingeriesuccess.com.